Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Hope you're doing well, guys. Welcome to my room. In this video, I wanted to talk about INFJs and conflict because it's a theme that recurs often when you look into, the typical characteristics of, the existence, the personality of an INFJ is that they don't like conflict, that they tend to avoid it, at all costs. And in many of my videos, I have mentioned this particular feature, that conflict is not something that comes easily to us. And I think fundamentally this still holds, but I wanted to make a video on the question of whether this means that an INFJ is necessarily going to be conflict avoidant, is necessarily going to submit to another party if that means avoiding conflict, and if in general conflict should always be avoided. Fundamentally, I think that this is not the case. I think that there are certain situations in life where conflict is important, and it's important to not bow down to other people and let them stamp on you just so that you can avoid experiencing a conflict with them. And not only that, but that's only a particular instance of conflict that is negative. Someone trying to intimidate you, someone having a particular kind of behavior, and you don't know what to do because you're facing someone that's kind of overwhelming or something, and you don't know what to do. In these instances, I think standing up for yourself is important. But there's another kind of conflict also that really does not have to be called conflict. It can be called constructive engagement or criticism. It's conflictual in the sense that it doesn't try to be nice. When someone is making like a commentary on your work, and is saying things that are not like necessarily trying to rub you in the right direction, that's not necessarily conflict. It's seen as conflict in the sense that you feel that you have to kind of defend your position. Now, there are certain types, I think especially TE types, T dominant or T auxiliary types, that are not going to be immediately defensive about this, because they will just see it as an opportunity for them to improve objectively and from a certain distance on what they've been building on. It's a lot harder for an FE user, for an NIF user who's likely to perceive something very viscerally, so if a comment is made that is critical, it's going to be very hard for an INFJ to not see that as a critique of them in a way. And this is definitely something that I experience a lot, but I think that the problem is you need to have a sense of how much conflict you're willing to engage in, because that's kind of a stressful factor. It's true that in some situations it's probably wiser to be agreeable. It's probably wiser to be agreeable in certain situations, even though that at the sort of in your innermost heart that you could contribute something that would fuel the fire or create conflicts. You don't completely agree with every little nuance that you hear in the conversation. There's probably a lot of situations in life where, for our own sake as INFJs, it's better to more or less be tactful, agreeable, or to learn the art of expressing disagreement in a very diplomatic way. I think that this is a great skill for an INFJ to have, to be diplomatic. To be diplomatic and to manage to not frustrate themselves and their self-esteem into not expressing what they think, but to express it in a way that is both conveying the way they really feel, and at the same time the form of it is such as to not stimulate conflict. So even if that means being a little bit too tactful, a little bit too diplomatic, I think that a majority of the time that's something that you should try to do. But it's not something that you should try to do for its own sake. It's also something that you should try to do so that you can keep your resources for conflict, but positive conflict, let's say. It sounds like an oxymoron, and it probably is, but you know what I mean. You have resources for positive conflicts. You know that it can be positive because it can be constructive. It can help you get better. It can help you improve your work. It can help you think about, aspects of your personality that you can work on. Do you know you have this positive criticism, positive conflict that is always waiting for you around the corner, and it's important to take it into account, to not always stay in the comfort zone of who you are and what you're bound to remain for your whole life without change, because that can lead to that can lead to stagnation and depression in the long run, to this self-complacency and being who you are with your limitations, seeing yourself in terms of limitations rather than in terms of possibilities. But if you see yourself in terms of possibilities, this means that you need to open the path toward the possibility, and this means working often on what you can improve, and that implies in turn being able to hear from the mouths of other people, some of whom might not be the most tactful, but are nevertheless honest. There's always something to be taken from what they say, unless it's purely destructive, and that happens, and you have to absolutely avoid those people. And it's important to be able to discern, like having the scale of discernment between like the people who are just there to be toxic and the people who are there to help out, even though they're not tactful. Very different kinds of people. It's important to learn to distinguish between them, and it's actually not that easy. It takes time, takes experience, takes all that. Nevertheless, you have resources. Every day you have a little, like imagine you have a little tank, of energy for being able to deal with conflict, like positive conflictivity, let's put it that way. If you want to have this tank available so that you can actually engage in it without it overwhelming you and making you feel too stressed out to be able to engage, if you want to be able to draw benefits from this engagement that is maybe in some part conflictual, and that's inevitably going to happen in real life, you want your resources to be more or less intact and more or less full, so that you can exhaust them by the end of the day. In order for them to be exhausted, they need to be there to start with. And in order for those resources to be there to start with, you need to make sure that you do not spend them too liberally, because the resources are limited. They're not quite as expansive as the resources of, say, like a person of the ENTJ type. A person of the ENTJ type is going to have vast resources for being able to handle conflict, negative and positive. An INFJ can do it. The resources, they're a little bit less expansive. They need to be nurtured more carefully. Which means that in all those instances where the stakes are not that high, they're not about self-improvement, they're not such that you can see and envision that from the conflict or the potential conflict, you could emerge bigger, you could emerge improved in your person. If you can see that it would not be, in the end, maybe not that productive to engage in argument, in conflictual argument, or whatever you want to call it, then I think that in these situations, yes, it's perhaps better to engage in tactful diplomatic exchanges and to be careful not to create the conditions whereby you'd end up in a conflict that doesn't have necessarily any constructive issue, and yet is going to stress you out, because your resources are limited. Every day they're limited. Keep them for what's constructive. Keep them for what can lead you to get out of your comfort zone so you can get better in certain areas where you can work on yourself. And that's not all the time, and that's not all possible conflicts. And so I think there's an art in recognizing the conflicts that are possibly constructive and distinguishing them, discriminating them from those that are not. It's not always easy. And to keep in mind, it's not that INFJs cannot handle conflicts. It's not that they cannot, that they are burnt out straight away by it. It's that they have limited resources for it. But limited does not mean non-existent. Those resources exist. You just have to make sure that you manage them as well as you can, with discernment and with economy. But still, keep in mind, criticism, it helps you improve, it helps you become better. And so you need to keep it in mind, and you need not to avoid it. Anyway, those were my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you soon. Ciao.